Over the course of the Champions Trophy, we're partnering with WPA Health Insurance, the only which-recommended health insurance provider in the UK. They offer health insurance plans for individuals, families, and companies of all sizes in the UK. To find out more, head to the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. The Champions Trophy is back 8 years on from Pakistan's famous win over India at the Oval. Everybody's second favourite 50-over sort of global event is back this week. We'll be doing a full-scale preview of the tournament. We'll also be talking about the culture in English cricket at the moment, given the miserable start England teams have had in 2025. We'll also answer your questions and some more. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Phil Walker and Kate Mason, who joins us for the first time this year. Unfortunately, not at the pub, as it was at the end of last year, but in surroundings I don't think we can really complain about.
Even more illustrious surroundings.
Even more illustrious surroundings than last year. A reminder that we are busy over on our Patreon channel from £5 a month plus VAT, where you get episodes after every day of England international cricket and an extra weekly episode each week. Last week, Joe Harmon interviewed Carl Hooper, his first cricketing love, on Valentine's Day. For long-time listeners of the show, I've genuinely never heard Joe that excited. So we'll be playing a snippet of that later on in the show. To kick off, JNP from the Patreon asked, does the panel feel like order is restored to the world now that England are shit again? Kate, we were trying to work out before we started recording. You have watched England lose a lot recently, hosting pretty much every day of English cricket this year so far over on TNT. The women's side have lost all 7 games they played. The men's side have lost 7 of the 8 games they've played. And even the England Lions, the second string side, lost 2 of their 3 tour games in Australia.
We're back, baby.
We are back.
I didn't present that, so I can't be held responsible for that one. Yeah, when TNT were like, great gig, watch some lovely cricket over the winter in sunny climates. Obviously, we're in London, but still, you get to look at the sunny climates. I didn't realise it would just be wall-to-wall failure. I am the face of failure.
You're fully inducted now into this world.
What have you thought of the reaction to it? Obviously, the Women's Ashes, I think it was more understandable given that no one was really predicting that, at least the scale of the defeat that England had. But on the men's side against India are the best white ball side in the world by quite a long way. They're enormous favourites for the Champions Trophy. Yet the reaction to England's defeat, I think, has been, you could tell that people are more annoyed than you perhaps might have otherwise thought. What have you made of that? Yeah,
it's a great point. I mean, it's hard for me to be completely unbothered by it because, as you point out, I've sat there and watched every single minute of every single defeat, and it was so nice watching a win, that little cheeky win they snuck in the middle of the T20s. Thank you, England. So I suppose you get into a sense of slight malaise watching, because actually we started to judge like how far into the game you could tell that England were going to lose, and by the last one I felt like it was drinks. It was clear, like this is not the first drinks, just to be clear. This is not going to happen. The reaction, do we think it's a sort of PR issue? Because some of the messaging and some of this whole cultural debate about originally what is Bazball for the test side, and then now Bazball's taken over white ball and what's going to happen with that. It kind of feeds into the question about what cricket means and you know, how important is it to care loads about tradition. That's what's the heart of it, I think, for some people. It's sort of like they were trying to tear up the rule book and stick 2 fingers up to everybody else, and it was quite fun and cool, and sometimes England were winning, and then now maybe it's a kind of reaction to that as well. So it's not just defeat, it's like you've let us down, you've let both sides down, the ones who like the idea of Bazball and the ones who don't like the idea of Bazball. But what I mean by PR is, I think some of the quotes, some of the comments have been unguarded. So certainly on the women's side, well, there was all of that palaver about Alex Holly not talking to members of the team and all that stuff, which has been covered to death. And then John Lewis, I don't know that talking to the press is the thing that demonstrates whether you're a good manager or not. As a huge Jose Mourinho fan, you'll feel like that is very important.
Always had a soft spot for the bastard.
It wasn't, speaking to it, wasn't particularly inspiring. You'd think you'd prepare, or you'd feel a bit more prepared about some of those quotes, given the scale of the defeat. In terms of the stuff with the men, it's just that. I
sort of wondered, like, is what they say. But yeah, but sometimes I think that the reaction is not at an appropriate level for what they're actually saying. I think sometimes it's not that bad. So, for example,
people like to talk though, don't they? Lots of people haven't watched any of this, right? So
that's true.
So on the one hand, I was saying I've watched it all, so I have the right to be like, oh, this is terrible and everything's shit. But on the other hand, quite often people don't watch it and then they see a quote.
But I still think it's a really interesting balance, because using the example, so since we last recorded, there was the whole palaver over, are England actually training? And Ravi Sastry and Kevin Peterson say that England aren't training.
No, they specifically said, I don't know, they said it slightly wrong on the thing, but they said they hadn't trained for a week, right? That was the point they were trying to make. In the ODIs, what I was told anyway, was that in the ODI leg of the tour, they trained before the first ODI and then not.
But what emerged later was that India only trained once, because you had several training days. It's quite a short series. And then Brendan McCullum, after the series, explained, well, actually, we have so many injury doubts for the Champions Trophy. Lots of these guys have played lots of cricket already this tour and also early in the winter. There's lots of cricket that's more important to come. We don't want to risk injuries before a bilateral game when players are playing a lot anyway. That wasn't that unreasonable. I think people still reacted quite extremely to that. And I think as to what you're saying, there's an undercurrent of dissatisfaction that I think has been bubbling for a while, that is reaching the top. I don't know, Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, I think your summary is pretty accurate, actually. I thought that there was a lot of... it's kind of like a cheap shot, really, on Peterson's part, I thought, really. Because the reality, first of all, the truth is much more nuanced than he declared it to be. But it's the oldest... put the boot in trick in cricket. Well, if you're losing games, you need naughty boy nets. You need to be scolded the morning after a defeat, and you need to be in the nets doing your thing. And because he's a natural populist, he will understand how that... I'm serious. He will understand how that line will play. And it possibly, if to give him credit, comes from a place of genuine concern for English cricket. And I don't think that he is simply shouting the odds to further his own story, although there's always an element of that with Kevin Peterson, as there is with lots of people. But I think in that particular instance, I thought it was a bit cheap on his part, and I think that's played out now with the explanations as to the circumstances around it. But I think you are right that it does play into a bubbling sense of dissatisfaction with what people perceive to be a laissez-faire attitude that permeates not just the men's team, but perhaps also the women's team as well.
Because that story was the perfect illustration, I think, of people's feelings, right?
And so it's a good catch-all, and you know that it's going to be headlined up on all the websites, and it's going to flurry around the game, around the media game.
Because it's about not caring about results. That's their whole shtick, right?
Right. And
we don't care about results. Duckett says we don't care if we lose the India series, if we win the Champions Trophy. How likely are they to win the Champions Trophy? We'll come on to that. But I guess the results are the bits that people watching and caring
for
and
sure,
thinking about.
For sure. And you're absolutely bang on that it goes to the heart of the iconic, classic Bazball creed. As soon as someone brings that idea in that is willfully disrupting the status quo, and it's pissed off not just, if you like, the traditionalist fans, but it's pissed off more moderate fans as well. And we've talked about this a lot on this show, that it taps into people's understanding of what the game should be and the grounding of their understanding of what the game should be. And Test cricket in particular, being the first target of Bazball, is so immaculate and so untouched, like a kind of Ming vase. And they, to use that analogy, talk about the Labour Party walking across marble floor holding a Ming vase. It's a bit like that with English cricket. If you play up and if you dare to subvert any of the old rules, the established rules of Test cricket, then you're offending people's sensibilities. Mad as that may be to say out loud, but that's what's happened. And so a lot of moderate folk who are by nature traditionalists, nostalgists, sentimentalists for cricket and everything cricket stands for and everything cricket means to them, they were prepared to go along with it and keep an open mind-ish. But if it stops working and if the results start to dry up and if there is a reversion to the mean of mediocrity and English cricket has lost too many test matches for this notion to be untouched and to be without challenge, then people start to get personally upset. They get personally offended almost. And I find it a bit odd because it's not like we've ever been that good.
Nostalgic cricket fans should be delighted.
For sure. Well, yeah. Yeah. The problem is that when you give up games that you should be winning and when you leave a little bit too much out there because you are devoted to this philosophy that is drilled in, cultishly drilled in to the players, and it's simultaneously a great liberating force for them to exist in the pressure cooker of international sport, but it also at times can be used as a bit of a cloak, an excuse for when bad decisions have been made at critical junctures. So you've seen it quite a lot in Test cricket. You've also seen it play out spectacularly. Not many teams go to New Zealand and win, and everyone was pissed off because they lost the third Test match.
Yeah, by the way, that was live on TNT Sports as well.
Covered that one.
Yeah.
What a week that was. With the one day side, I'm intrigued by how this plays out because McCullum brings, I think in a funny kind of way, the constraints of Test cricket actually help Bazball.
I agree.
I think there is more necessary tactical strategy in white ball cricket than there is in Test cricket, because Test cricket undulates and it allows itself to play, it creates its own narratives and it plays out over time, and you can let the game go almost. And Stokes can try funky things and some will work and one or two won't, and they can recalibrate it at the end of the night and have a rest, and then if you're a good side, then you find a way in the end. In one day cricket, it's a lot less like that. And they need to marry up the freeing nature of Bazball with the cold, hard strategies that are required in order to win consistent games of T20 cricket and 50-over cricket.
2 point... Oh, sorry.
No, definitely jump in. Definitely.
Kate, do you remember
I know.
what Phil's New Year resolution was?
Incisiveness.
It was brevity. It was brevity.
Brevity. Well, I think it was very incisive. You were being very incisive.
Yeah. But long-winded nonetheless.
The two things I was going to say, of course, the other reason why people get annoyed, and it is a bit annoying, is because the nature of the defeats in the India tour, only really 3 games of the whole lot were that competitive. But generally speaking as well, it plays into that idea that, as you're saying, the shorter the format, the more precise you perhaps need to be in terms of your planning. And then it feels like this is anathema to that. And then, if they're not being precise, then you want them to suffer. And then that plays into the other point, which is about getting down the nets and doing the hard yards and all this other stuff, which I don't know. I feel sort of philosophical today, but I think there is something, people really are living quite good lives when they're playing professional sport. I know there's a lot of pressure. I know there's a lot of stress, and some people, deal with it in different ways. And, you talk to all sorts of former professional athletes who've had terrible struggles with how the pressure plays out and not being able to do what they feel they should be able to do. But fundamentally in there is the belief or the idea that, from our perspective, us sitting watching, that these guys and girls are getting to play cricket. They're going to get to play a game for a job. Yeah. And I mean, look, fundamentally, I'm not in a great position to talk because I get to sit around and chat shit with, former professional athletes on a sofa for a job. It's not really a job, is it? But but people shout at me online, and I think probably that's part of that desire. It's like, these people got to suffer somehow. They're losing. They get to have a lovely life, and they don't seem to get any issues.
But you do tap into a key part of this. An element of it is that Stokes, in particular, has been quite vocal in saying we need to persuade our players, our cohort of Test players, that that it's worth doing. That this is fun, this is rewarding. Not just financially, but crucially, it makes for a good life. And the subtext of that is the landscape's never been more cluttered and mottled and complicated than it is currently. And we are having to fight for the time and the commitment of our players. Now, again, that is speaking from a pragmatic position that Stokes holds. But you imagine hearing that as an average punter.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
It's not ideal at all. It's not. And again, it feeds that slight element of distrust. And so then when you hear players, slightly defensively saying certain things in interviews, and often on the back of having played what in the old world would look like a wildly irresponsible shot, but in the new world is all just part of the rhythms, folks, and get with it. But when it's said out loud and it's followed by these actions or preceded by these actions, then again, there is a slight kind of breaking of the sort of social contract, right, between these representatives of your nation and your team and the thing that you dream of and love and talk endlessly on podcasts and in pubs with your mates, and actually committing to it fully. Now, I'm not questioning, for what it's worth, genuinely, the commitment of the players who wear the shirt. That is still, and we're very lucky in this respect, by the way, it's still the most important thing that they will do on a cricket field. And I don't think there's hardly any England player who pulls on that shirt slightly ambivalently. But the perception creeps in. It does creep in. And I think they're at a bit of a hinge point at the moment. The stakes are so high for this test team this calendar year. Stokes either emerges as literally Sir Ben Stokes a week into January, having pulled off the impossible, or he and McCullum walk away having been tarnished with pissing up the programme. And
what was interesting from a cricketing point of view is there's actually very few games left. So the white ball lot only have the Champions Trophy is now. So this is the big event, and the Test team only has the Test against Zimbabwe before the India series and then before the Ashes, and there's very little else.
There's a lot of talk about blocking out the noise, right? And this is a sports person thing. Everyone's saying it, blocking out the noise. Madison was saying it yesterday, blocking out the noise, and then obviously, nice. And then obviously talking in depth about having failed to block out the noise because the noise is there. Well, I quite liked that response of him yesterday, that footballer. And I would like to see a bit more from the cricket crowd, because they hide behind, we block out the noise. We're just in our own bubble. I get that, but there's a lot of noise around. And sometimes I'd like to just hear one or two of them dare to lean into it, to discuss this in a bit more depth beyond the platitudes of, it's a great environment, folks. It's a great environment. Well, tell me, or address what you know to be the case, what you know to be the murmurs and the noise outside. Don't pretend that it's not being created, because it is. To
be fair, Josh Buttler actually has done that at points. Before the T20 World Cup in the Caribbean, he did an interview with the BBC's Henry Moran, where he was quite spiky in a way that we're not used to seeing from Buttler. And he got a fair bit of stick for his manner in that interview. But this is what I mean. I think like cricket players, sports people across sports, they're in a difficult position, because I think when they are genuinely honest and show they're irritated, they get stick. And when they hide behind cliches, they also get stick. But before we move on, Kate, I wanted to ask, what's it like helming the coverage when it is that negative? Because there's so much negativity around it. I suppose like the way people act on social media isn't as positive as it would be if England are winning every game they play. And also in terms of like putting on a show when very similar things are happening every game across both the women and the men's series.
We just try to shut out the noise. And, we've got our own team. We've got our own way of doing things.
Trust the process.
Trust the process. Keep delivering. We'll get there. It's a sort of an interesting challenge. Like, I'm such a enthusiast of life, so that's really fun, and it's such a nice, honestly, not to be sort of ludicrous, but it is such a nice group of people. Like, the team is really brilliant making the telly. So that is just makes life very easy. But in terms of the actual broadcasting challenge of it, you're right, it is a challenge, because ideally you're doing a TV programme around a game of cricket because you want people to watch it. And I suppose few people are going to be inclined to watch it well, maybe actually, I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe we should have run some sort of A/B test where we really laid into one of the post shows, and then we were really trying to be upbeat one of the other shows.
It's
but
really tricky.
I don't want to do the same thing personally. I don't want to do the same thing all the time. And also, my role is about, as we've talked about before, is about getting as your role is here, is about getting your best out of your teammates, basically. Sometimes it's very hard to talk about it in a productive way, particularly in that women's Ashes. It is a challenge because these people are people, so you're on their side, right? You always want to be on the side of everybody, if that's possible. But then equally, you're on the side of your viewers who can see what they can see.
And sometimes they want blood, right? Sometimes your viewers, they want to vent, they want a bit of catharsis, they want to see a bit of anger.
Cards on the table, as a kid, when England were rubbish, I would go out of my way to watch what Bob Willis would say on the verdict.
Yeah.
It would make me feel slightly better. As an Arsenal fan, when we were not very good, I used to go out of my way to watch Arsenal fan TV when we were not very good.
God,
it just made me feel slightly better, and you sort of laughed at it.
I mean, these are why I love broadcasting and why it's so interesting. Is because you're trying to create something that's more than the sum of its parts with all of these different elements and these different styles of storyteller. And it's not obviously just the people sitting on the sofa, it's all the people making the amazing montages and piecing together the clips and all that. There was a cute little montage at the very end of all the coverage that featured like lots of, not like outtakes, but little bits from the series. And the way that you're trying to tell the story, if it is just like a dirge, that feeds into the way I think everyone feels. You're running a team, right? It's a community of people coming together who like cricket to make the best show that they can. But you were right. So I think there were sometimes, and also sometimes I think I maybe feel, this might be wrong, but so all the patrons come and tell me that it is. But
this is the big one, mate. This is the flagship.
Yeah. But like everyone, all the ones who paid, they get the right to be as rude as possible.
Oh, they're actually very, very complimentary. They are lovely. Every single one of them is lovely.
I just mean if you paid, you can be ruder, maybe. But everybody can say, you want more angst, and I'm looking at it from the wrong perspective. But I sometimes do feel, especially when we've, for example, been awake all night, as we were for some of them, or getting up at these ludicrous hours, I sometimes feel a bit protective to my guys and my girls on the sofa.
Yeah.
And so rant, please, and think about it in advance if you're gonna. Probably want to say stuff that you can back up.
Yeah.
And you don't wanna in some case do stuff that will damage your friends, but equally it is your responsibility to be interesting.
Yeah, no, 100%. I just think that the reason why I brought the Willis thing up wasn't because I think that's what coverage should be. I think that punditry has just changed, where individual pundits are more reluctant to put the boot in the same way as I think it used to be a little bit more normal. I think people are more aware that these are actual human beings and their professional careers that you're slagging off, basically. I think.
But don't you also think that if you look again at football coverage, then it's more...
That's different.
Yeah, but that's what everything else is measured by, right? And that's the behemoth of sport in this country. And it seems to me when I watch the pundits at work in football that they are consciously trying to find the angle that's going to make the headline, that's going to then feed the discourse, and it be of this perpetual thing. More pointed and aggressive than it used to be. But you're saying you think in cricket that it's...
I think English cricket in particular is is such a small world.
Yeah.
In the media sphere. I remember, so even today I was reading an article on the Telegraph about a football player that was so negative. I was thinking I would never ever read any in a national paper any sort of analysis about a cricket player like this. This is so much more negative than anything. Even when a player is going through a really rough patch, there's a little bit more empathy, I think, and I think that's across all forms of media with cricket. There's just more empathy, and we get a lot of pelters actually for being too nice about England when they're doing badly. Like last week's podcast, for example, we genuinely spent the first half an hour was purely negative on England. They lost 6 of the last 7 games, and the YouTube comments were like, "Oh, they're going so easy on England." I was like, "What? What? We couldn't have gone in any more negative." I felt bad afterwards. Thinking, they're not that bad a side. Yeah. Should we move on?
Yeah.
So one name to watch in English cricket in 2025 is Ben McKinney. The 20-year-old Durham opener is a former England under-19s captain and was a standout performer on the recent England Lions tour of Australia. McKinney is a very tall lefty who scores very quickly and has long been touted as someone whose game should suit Australian conditions. He proved those predictions right in Australia, scoring a runnable 110 against a very strong Australia A side in Sydney. We're about to play an interview with him in a second, but I think there's a reasonable chance, Phil, that he is in an England squad this year.
Well, look, whisper it. There may well be an opening berth coming available in the test side before too long. And I can absolutely see it. He fits the bill perfectly. One of the best young players around. Also a really good footballer.
Really good footballer.
Outstanding footballer. Saw him warming up for Durham at the Oval last summer. I thought, who's this kid? Forget what he might do with a cricket bat. Sign him up. And I think he was at Sunderland's academy.
Well, on the yes, and also on the day of the interview, he was off to the stadium that evening. We actually ended the interview with a conversation about Joe Bellingham. Right. So anyway, here is that chat that I had with McKinney about not just Joe Bellingham, but the cricket as well. You've just got back from Australia. How was that tour for you? I imagine you wouldn't have done many tours like that before.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Obviously done Brisbane with the 19s maybe 2 years ago, maybe back end of 2023, and done Cape Town before Christmas, but obviously not done much overseas. It was an amazing experience. And obviously helped having great coaches there like Freddie and Swanee, but also having a young side like we did, it just made it even easier. So it was a brilliant tour.
What were those two guys like to work with? Obviously, two England greats.
Yeah, they were. I mean, Swanee's like mad. Obviously, everyone knows that, but at the same time, it's not about what you learn technically almost. And obviously, they do give you technical stuff, but I feel like from the tactical side of the game, you can't have many better people. I don't think in English cricket, like everything, like even the little 1%ers are just really good. It's just really good to have people like that around. Obviously, there was other great coaches like Neil Kane was there as well, and it's just good to have that experience and, like I say, not technical work almost, but getting that tactical side of the game down, mental side as well.
Yeah, I guess both of those guys are really famous for not just the technical aspects of their cricket, but also dealing with the mental side of the game. Like both those guys were players who really rose in the big occasions. Like what sort of advice were they giving? Because as you say, it's a really young Lions squad.
Yeah, I mean the big thing for the group that we had was that obviously they've seen the talent that there was in the group, and obviously the rawness of it. Obviously a young team, only with a couple of like Sam Cook, for example, Josh Tongue, and it was just to have fun. And really the results didn't go the way that we wanted them to, but at the same time, if you looked at our team, compared to the A team, it was a lot different at the different end of the spectrum. And I think just giving us the freedom to go out there and have fun, because, like I said, the result didn't actually matter. And that was always going to get the best out of us, and I think it did. Even in the practice games, we had obviously great performance. Like Rocky was like 16 to do that is ridiculous, and just little things like I feel like we all had the freedom to do what we went out there to do, and that's play our natural game. And obviously, you can refine that. You can look back at that tour and refine things where you went wrong or where. But I feel like the rawness of it just made it even better, because you could just go out there and do what you thought was right and play your natural game.
Do you feel like you enjoy your batting more when you have that sort of sense of freedom?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But I love different scenarios, because I feel like there's nothing. Obviously, I'm quite an attacking batsman, but the game out the other part of my game is I really want to be versatile at the same time, and I feel like I love having it's all well and good when the wicket's flat and stuff like that and bash it, but I really want to be versatile, and I think obviously you do get your best your best attributes out when the wickets are good and things like that, and you get that from the coaches and stuff. But obviously it's important for me to be versatile and play in different situations, especially at such a young age. We're all pretty young, but if I get them now, then I feel like you also become more of a complete cricketer or a batter. So
you got that ton in the game against Australia A, the first class game. For all the talk of freedom and play your natural game and all that would have been quite a difficult match situation to come in. But did you feel empowered to still play your natural game despite how things were going on the scoreboard?
yeah, definitely, because like I feel like the higher that you go up, the more instinctual it gets, and like I say, it was a good wicket. And just having that, like when people are trying to knock your head off and stuff like that, the best comes out, and all the instincts kick in, and you do end up playing your natural game. And it's also what you think's best on the day. Like obviously, sometimes you don't feel as good as that, but on that particular day, it felt really good. Got a bit of luck, but yeah, it felt amazing. So glad that I got that experience.
How did you find conditions out there? What's different about playing in Australia over the winter compared to batting in the northeast in April and May?
If you compare them two, it's a massive difference. Yeah, everything's hitting your stumps here, but yeah, the pace isn't the difference. It's more of that, like probably a ball or two more bounce maybe, and that actually just takes like a week or so when you get there and you get training. But yeah, in my opinion, it probably suits me more actually, because I'm quite tall, so being able to just actually trust the bounce and actually play like on top of it instead of actually having to work hard to get down to the ball, like it just gives you that freedom. So yeah, I'd say the conditions were like tougher to get used to, but obviously I felt like my style of batting suited it.
I remember when you were playing for the 19s, your coach Michael Yardy actually said there and then that you've got a game that really would suit bouncier pitches. Is that something that's just to do with your height, or are there any other things in terms of what you're trying to do at the crease that you think suit pitches with a bit more bounce in them?
I mean, a lot of it does come down to natural, like height, but also like that shot off like a length. I'm probably better off like sliding it off a length than I am at actually a half volley. And I think obviously the higher you go up, you don't get as many half volleys, and you actually, if you think about it, you probably get more on the short side. And that's something I worked really hard at the last couple of years, is that on the short ball. And I feel like if you have the short ball and that sort of hard length nailed down, I feel like it can really suit you. And obviously, it's a lot easier being said by me because I'm taller. But yeah, I think my game does definitely suit that bouncier, faster wickets.
You talked about Flintoff and Swan earlier. Do you remember them playing?
To be fair, I literally had this conversation a couple of days ago. It was if I'm thinking about Freddie, the only things I see, obviously he was well known for the 05. I was 1, so no. But actually, Swanee played till about 2013, didn't he? 14.
Yeah.
So I do remember Swanee playing, but obviously I didn't really have. That is surreal because he's Graham Swan, but obviously I didn't really have much affiliation to offspin, so I didn't really care. But obviously seeing Freddie on, like, I see it even on Instagram or TikTok, you see them reels. It's amazing. It is really surreal to have them as coaches.
Out of interest, who were your first English players you looked up to growing up?
Oh, mine 100% was Alistair Cook.
Yeah.
Because I used to actually bat, like, obviously Cookie, like, legend, like, scored millions of runs. But I used to bat, like, wouldn't say negative, but I used to just wait until I was in or whatever. And I used to bat all day when I was a kid. When I was like, I used to get 50 or 40 overs and stuff like that. So he was definitely the one I looked up to. But to be fair, there was no one else really. I just loved opening the batting, and he was obviously the best opening batter we've had. So
has anyone compared your game to Trescothick again before your time? But when I see highlights of you bat, it's weird actually in terms of how similar it is to Trescothick.
To be fair, I have heard that one, but like I said, and I don't really like watching cricket that much. Like I obviously watch a little bit, but I've never seen him really bat. I've obviously seen the odd clip. Like unbelievable player. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to be compared styles wise to him. But yeah, I haven't seen much of him.
And when did that sort of style change happen? When you went from scoring 50 or 40 overs to batting more positively nowadays?
Probably so. I probably came in at the right time for Baz and Stokesy, like to the 19s actually. So what was that, maybe 2 years? And probably when Campbell came in, because Durham actually we're trying to play a really positive brand as well. And I just think that change there, and obviously getting a bit bigger and a bit stronger, really changed the way I think about the game and how I want to go about my business. But yeah, it was really good timing in terms of see Campbell being appointed as Durham and obviously Baz and Stokesy is with England and how the brand wanted to be played. So
how good was it for you coming through into the senior setup at Durham, with Durham, as you say, playing that really positive brand of cricket and doing so really successfully over the last couple of years? How good has it been for you becoming a professional for the first time in that environment?
it was amazing actually, because all the talk about pressure, but like pressure when you're coming into the professional game is massive, because you're obviously dying to do well, but you almost feel like that pressure's not there, especially when you've got people like Leesy, who's obviously so experienced and obviously been around England for a little bit as well. Bedders and people like that, like people who've got such good experience, and also the fact that you're batting so good that you can actually just go out there with no fear. And obviously that's massive from the way I play, and obviously having that not protection, but obviously having that array of good quality batters in our group actually just give me the clarity of just go and hit the ball, see the ball, hit the ball. However,
You don't strike me as a particularly nervous young man.
yeah, to be fair, I mean, in general, probably I am, but not when I get on the. I don't try, and I don't think about the game too much when I'm out there. To be fair, so.
No, nice. I mean, yeah, talk to me a bit more about Durham, because I think what they've done on the field the last couple of years is really cool. They're probably the first county that started playing anything like what England were doing, and obviously you got the link with Stokes there as well. But throughout that season where you got promoted to Div 1, and then even in Div 1 as well, playing like cricket that no one else was really doing.
To be fair, I wish I was around the group a bit more in that Div 2 winning side. Obviously, we had an unbelievable team, but the way they went, every time we stepped, because obviously the second team was out and about, but every time I stepped back in the dressing room doing 12th man or just actually watching, the confidence they had I've never seen it like that in my life. Coming from like a club on a Saturday or whatever, or even the year before when Frankie was involved, like the energy and everything changed that year, and it obviously carried into this year. We had a decent year. Obviously, would have liked to do a lot better, but that energy hasn't changed, and that clarity hasn't changed with the way Campbell wants to play.
And how much have you, I guess, absorbed from spending a bit of time with Stokes? He's been around a bit over the last few years.
He has been around, but I haven't really seen much of him. The good thing is he gives me some of his bats, so that's the only plus. But yeah, I remember he played that game against Somerset, was it, at home? And I was 12th man. Honestly, it was unbelievable. The level he has for himself, like the expectancy he has on himself, is amazing. I think I was out there for about 12 balls. Like obviously, we're like I said, the energy is high in our group anyway. But that difference, that little bit extra, it was amazing. That he brought. But I'd like to say, I really would like to speak to him a little bit more about things. I don't really see him much, but yeah.
You mentioned that you're not a huge watcher of cricket. Do you think that almost gives you like a better perspective when you're on the field, that there's actually other things in life that matter more than bat versus ball?
I think the reason I don't watch as much cricket as maybe some of the people is just because purely on, like, I just feel like there's more to do with I'm really specific with what I watch. So if it's gonna help me bat well, I'll watch it. But in general, I would never watch it just because I feel like there's better things to do. in like
outside cricket, what is it that you like doing? Have you got other sports that you still like playing a lot of?
I don't play football a lot now, but I used to be like semi decent at football, and I love Sunderland, so I'm go to the match tonight as well. So anytime I get to watch Sunderland, I'll watch them.
Reckon you guys going up?
We make it hard for ourselves, to be fair. Playoffs, definitely.
And how good's Joe Bellingham? Because I'm an Arsenal fan and I've seen him linked with us, and I've been looking out for for any headlines with his name in it.
Do you know what it is? He's talented. He's actually got a lot better. Like, he was pretty good before, like decent, but he's probably worth 20-25 million now. He's a tank. He's a tank now. He just does, like, he's a bit like, obviously not like his brother because he wouldn't be at Sunderland, but the way they carry themselves, oh my God, he's gone.
Awesome. Well, I won't take any more of your time, Ben. Best of luck tonight, and also best of luck with the season when it eventually gets underway. Cheers, mate.
Thanks a lot, mate. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Other bit of news around England this week. The Hampshire speedster Sonny Baker has been awarded an England development contract after impressing on that Lions tour. He's 21, a Somerset Academy graduate who's yet to play in the county championship, but he is genuinely quick. He's been clocked at above 90 miles per hour. In the press release announcing that he was getting this contract, there was a very interesting line, perhaps arguably an unnecessary line from Andrew Flintoff. It is.
Megalomania.
So Andrew Flintoff was the head coach of this Lions tour and delivers the line about Baker. He says, he and I are very different in character and personality, but it's been a delight to see the pride he takes in wearing the three lions, the energy he brings to every ball, and the theatre and magic he creates on the pitch. Why were those first 10 words necessary?
Yeah, start with the word after but. It's often a pretty good policy anyway.
Just from an editing perspective, just a copywriting. So what would be the opposite good characteristics of Flintoff?
This is what I want to know. What characteristics Sonny Baker has that Flintoff has none of? That's what I would like to know.
Yeah. I suppose at that stage in life, he's potentially better sporting habits in terms of what you take off the field, I suppose, and what you drink.
They're not bad for
eat.
a fat lad. Yes.
They could have written it differently, couldn't it?
I don't think you edit Fred's words. if you're an ECB apparatchik, you do not edit Fred's words. It's great he's involved though, Fred, but that's a completely side issue. I'm all over this Sonny Baker. Great name for me. You know,
get him in on that account.
Sounds, kind of sort of jazz drummer. You know, more blokes who sound like they work the skins after hours, the better to get into the England side. Sonny Baker, he's meant to be very good. I haven't really seen him, to be honest.
He's quick.
Have you seen him live?
Yeah, and he went viral when he was 18 for a spell for like Somerset Academy.
We all went viral when we were 18. Yeah.
What did you get viral at age 18? That's the second time Phil's age has been brought up in consecutive shows. Presuming that Butch isn't listening this far into the show, I did enjoy when he asked whether or not who was older out of the two of you. And in my head, I was thinking, it's actually you, Butch, by quite a long way. Anyway, I think Baker's another one, especially I think fast bowlers can sort of emerge from nowhere, go straight into England squads. And I think because of the speed he bowls, I think if he gets a good run of games together at the start of the season for Hampshire, he could be in the mix very quickly. Moving on, are you ready to take your cricket club to the next level? Look no further than Total Play, the cricket pitch experts. Picture this, a high-performance, low-maintenance cricket facility that helps attract and retain new members, all while capitalising on the sport's surging popularity, especially among women and girls. Their state-of-the-art non-turf cricket match pitches and practice facilities carry ECB approval and have given clubs of all sizes the space to grow their game. From village clubs to first-class grounds, they bring vision to reality and will be there to support you on every step of the journey. So why wait? Elevate your club's game with Total Play. Visit their website or call them today to transform your cricketing dreams into a winning reality. Total Play, your path to cricketing success. Moving on, the Champions Trophy begins on Wednesday. We're basically going to talk about who we think is going to get through to the semi-finals. We're going to start with Group A.
Who is in Group A?
That's a really good question. It's a really, really good question.
And I do know. I'm not.
Okay. No.
I might need reminding actually.
India, Pakistan, New Zealand, and Bangladesh.
Well, so India, I think, is a
Brilliant.
Pretty
That's
simple.
why we get you in.
That's the insight. That's my insight. Can you pick the other one? I actually think this is quite hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Pakistan are hosts, and across sport you see the advantage you get for being host, although obviously India, and depending on how far India get to the competition, Pakistan may lose their home advantage at a crucial stage.
Which is casually staggering, isn't it? No? Yes.
It's huge. It's absolutely enormous.
huge.
This doesn't really happen in other sports.
We simply just shrug our shoulders. There was a great question on the Twitters, maybe, or the good one, the nice one. It was on the nice one. It was on Blue Sky. And someone says, why is cricket so stupid? And then listed a few reasons. Again, cricket stupidity just this week.
Yeah.
And it's a great question. And it taps right into that right there, that we can organise a world event. First time Pakistan have hosted a world event since 1996 when they hosted the World Cup. I don't think there was anything since. And if the final happens and one team happen to be in it, then sorry, geopolitics, folks. So that's that. And you imagine
it's good for India to play in the same place throughout as well, isn't it? It's good. I think we can all agree that if any team needs consistency and not as much travelling and like just a bit of help, India. It's India, guys.
But this is the second tournament in a row where India have been treated slightly differently to other teams in the T20 World Cup. They knew exactly where they were playing their semi-final. This is the sort of thing that just doesn't happen in other sports, but cricket has just become used to this. I think we suspected for a very long time that even though the Champions Trophy was going to be held in Pakistan, that it was unlikely that India would play their games in Pakistan. So yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing that we do shrug our shoulders to, because I think most people feel quite powerless against it, which is a shame. But I mean, which is also a shame. I must add, it's a shame for the actual India team, because they are the best team in the world by such a long way. And that's completely irrespective to the fact they had a bit of an advantage at the T20 World Cup in terms of knowing their semi-final location. And they will have an advantage in this World Cup in terms of knowing exactly where they're going to play for the whole thing. They are the best team by an absolute miles, as we said on last week's podcast, even though they don't have Jasprit Bumrah.
Michael Atherton says that you just got to go on form with World Cups and stuff. So is New Zealand the answer in that case? Bangladesh also, head coach has said, we are here to be champions.
Yeah.
So you can't look much past that.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Phil, how do you see it?
I'd go with those two, New Zealand. And
I think I would as well. I think...
See, brevity.
There you go.
Mason rings for about 20 minutes.
He's making progress.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think with New Zealand won. There was a tri-series that happened in the last week between New Zealand, Pakistan and South Africa. New Zealand won it. Yeah. South Africa weren't nearly at full strength. And if you look at the strengths of India in particular, I think one of the reasons why they're such a good ODI side is that they have depth both in the batting department and in the bowling department, which is something at the moment England are struggling to do. They normally are weaker at one of the two. New Zealand bat well to number 8 and have 6 bowling options because they have the all-rounders of Santner and Bracewell. Santner's going really well at the moment. Kane Williamson's just found a bit of form, and their seam attack is not usually the same group that has basically been at every ICC event for the last 15 years. It's new, but I think potentially quite exciting. We saw how good Will O'Rourke was in the Test series against England just before Christmas. Nathan Smith as well. Jacob Duffy's a guy who's been around for a while, but looks like he's got a bit better. And Lockie Ferguson could play a part in the competition, but he's an injured out at the moment. I feel Pakistan are just... knowing Pakistan, this is exactly when they do well, when everyone's writing them off and they're not doing very well at the moment. But I look at their lineup.
Big loss to have lost the left-hander.
Exactly,
who made brilliant 100 a couple of months ago up top.
Exactly. Yeah.
But Babar Azam goes up top, and I feel a bit sorry for him because he carries that slightly lopsided team. And as soon as he has a bad run, and he has had a bad run across the board, a relatively fallow run anyway, then the pressure really does come down hard on him. He is their golden boy. He goes up top. I think he's going to open in place of Ayub, who's, as I say, injured. I want him to be the player of the tournament and them to win it. That would be my dream. That would be my first hope. I want him to make 600 runs and Pakistan to win. And if they have to win in Dubai or wherever it is, then in a way, it's all the greater for the story. That would be my first choice. But I'm fearful for them. I think that the pressure that they're under, and it is a slightly uneven setup. I think if they lose one game, then it becomes ultra hard because of the noise all around it. So my instinct says India and New Zealand, but I'd love to be wrong, and I'd love to see Pakistan go away.
One player to watch on a Pakistan note is Salman Ali Agha. He's played a fair bit of Test cricket as sort of like a bits and pieces number 7 who bats a bit and bowls a bit. But it turns out he actually just might be a really good middle order batter.
As
He's got
a
lot of
finisher?
runs, more of like a number 5. And he's done really well in the last couple of weeks. My issue with Pakistan is that they're picking a couple of all-rounders at the moment who have really quite mediocre recent records. Fahim Ashraf, there was like a graphic going around of his like record in the last 2 years in ODI cricket, like averaging something like 10 with the bat and 80 with the ball. And Kustal Shah's in the side as well. And Shadab Khan, who's one of my favourite players, can't find a spot in the Pakistan squad, let alone 11. And I think that is an area where they're potentially a bit weak. And Bangladesh, they're really competitive at home and less so out away from home. Again, if your people are looking for players to watch in the tournament, Yas Rana is a new-ish Bangladesh seamer, 21 years old. He's genuinely really quick.
He's 155 kph. He's fast.
Fast.
I made a mark in Test cricket just before Christmas.
Exactly. So him, Taskin, and Mustafizur is a genuinely pretty decent attack. And Mahedi now back to the middle order.
World-class all-rounder, Mahedi.
Yeah, so I think they're more than capable of winning a game or two. Just I don't necessarily think they're. I suppose if they win 2 games, they'll probably get into the semi-finals. So
this is it. It's a bit of a crapshoot.
Yeah,
that's why it's quite a fun tournament.
Yeah,
you know, as you say, it's everybody's second favourite 50 over occasional vaguely scripted tournament.
I mentioned last week that this tournament has an amazing survival instinct. So I was talking to Abhishek Mukherjee from the Wisden India team, who's a bit of a cricket historian. So in the first tournament in 1998, which way around is this? It was held in Bangladesh, right?
Was that the India-Sri Lanka shared? No, it wasn't. I think New Zealand might have won it.
Yeah.
The first one's in Bangladesh.
First one was in Bangladesh, and flooding at the time had put the tournament in doubt. So even before it started, it nearly ended. Then in 2000, it was held in Kenya, and the tournament nearly didn't take place because there were loads of droughts. So again, pitch preparation was a genuine issue. And then basically every time the tournament has happened since then, there have been serious talks about binning the competition. The tournament, I think, had been binned after 2017, and now it's back. It's kind of extraordinary. Just when everyone's saying we should be playing less 50-over cricket, we're back with
But there was
the
also
trophy.
There was definitely one where India and Sri Lanka shared it because it pissed down on the day of the final and the reserve day. So they just shrugged their shoulders and shared it. Imagine that. Imagine that in any other world
high
title.
jumper. Is it high jumper?
Yeah, high jump at the Olympics where they shared
Yeah,
the medal.
Qatar.
Great shout.
Italy? I want to say
I think
Italy.
that's
I
right.
want to say
I
Italy.
think that's absolutely right.
Before we get to Group B, we're marking the return of the Champions Trophy by partnering with WPA Health Insurance, the only which recommended health insurance provider in the UK for the last 2 years in a row, offering health insurance plans for individuals, families and companies of all sizes across the UK. WPA is based in Taunton, Somerset, and is also a long-standing partner of Somerset County Cricket Club. Kate, Group B.
Yes.
England, Australia, South Africa, Afghanistan. England have only won 4 out of their last 14 games since the World Cup.
Silence is the enemy of audio mediums.
It can speak volumes, though.
It's very hard. I'm a bit gaslit by Duckett saying that, you know, they don't care about losing, and India being so good, and the pitches are different, and maybe it's all fine. And in some way, in my head, you know, Kane Williamson obviously hasn't played ODIs since 2023, and then comes back and is good at it. I don't have an equivalent at the England side, but I just mean that, like, you'd think you'd need to have batting form in order to be able to score runs, but maybe it's all just fine. And also, well, I mean, to answer the question a different way, of course, Australia are missing a lot of people. Enjoyable, like Stoinis pulling out, having been asked to play. South Africa, form, if we're doing the Atherton form question, they shouldn't get through. Afghanistan, I don't know. They're keeping, you know, dark horses, and they've achieved such a lot in recent years. So I guess they're the form team probably in this group. So if we're going on form,
No one's going through.
Nobody. They just have none from this group. Form, I guess, kind of Afghanistan and then Australia, but then Australia, it's not the same team because they're missing, you know, all of the people who take wickets. and their captain, and it's changed.
And
their captain and captain and blah blah blah. Yeah.
What's quite interesting about this tournament is that so a team like New Zealand, I think, if this was a World Cup, people would be saying it's a solid team. Maybe they'll get to the semi-finals, but because of where this is in the World Cup cycle, it's relatively early on between the end of the last one and the start of the next one. Teams, I think, are in flux more than normal for a tournament like this. So actually just being a pretty solid side, I think gets you quite far. So like with Australia, for example, ordinarily for a tournament like this, they'd be obviously among the favourites, and I think they will still do pretty well because they're Australia. But they are so much weaker than when they normally are, with some relatively unproven players in there. So Jake Fraser-McGurk, for example, is likely to bat in the top 3. He's got a pretty poor ODI record so far, albeit from a relatively small sample size. I think the thing with England is...
dangerous player, but he had a really bad BBL as well.
Yeah.
Barely scored a run, was quite down on his luck by the end of it. So, again, top three in a 50 over side, he might explode, but it's a big risk.
With England, I'm sort of torn. I actually think they've got a reasonable chance of getting at least to the semi-finals, and I think not getting to semi-finals would represent a failure, I think, given that Australia are missing so many players. Afghanistan, I understand why people are excited by them. They got to the semi-finals of the T20 World Cup, but I still look at their batting up and think that's light. Their seam bowling attack is light if conditions are favourable to fast bowlers. If the pitches are quick, I don't think they've got enough back up to Fazal Haq Faruqi and Naveen ul Haq in the seam bowling department, which I think leaves open a pretty big gap for England to get through. And I think that we sometimes assume that conditions in Asia are just the same, but actually between Pakistan and India, they can be quite different. If you look at who's taking wickets in India the last 5 years, spinners have dominated. In Pakistan, it's not really the same. Phil, am I being overly optimistic?
Perhaps, but I agree with you. Firstly, you've just got to be in the top 50% to qualify for the semi-finals. So it doesn't constitute this remarkable feat to creep in there. I think my two are South Africa and England. And I wouldn't have said that.
South Africa?
And I wouldn't have said that if Australia had their full bowling side out.
Yeah.
My case for England is flimsy, no doubt. But my instinct is that the pitches will be pretty flat. Dry and flat. And they marmalise medium fast on flat tracks. It's when it swerves off the straight, either by the slowies or with a bit of swing under certain conditions. Perhaps when games roll into the evening under lights, it may be a different story. But I think if England win a couple of tosses in their 3 games, and
Josh Butler is very good at winning the toss. We know that.
We
know that.
Yeah. Which makes England's recent record potentially a bit more concerning.
Yeah, it's an absolute leap of faith considering how they went against India, but then caveats abound in that.
Yeah, I think the fundamental thing against England is they really struggle to balance a side at the moment. They either go in with a side that's batting light or bowling light.
So they need two of Root, Butler and Brooke to have good tournaments. And none of them played particularly well across the 7-match India or 8-match India series, albeit Joe obviously only played in the 3 ODIs. But that's where they let themselves down in India, that the big batters didn't get the runs, and so you expose this flimsy, far too long tail. Bethel's a loss, that's a blow, because he would have fitted in and would have helped to balance the side a little bit with a little bit of left arm spin. It's a leap of faith, but I think actually the England-Afghanistan game could be a real arse nipper for England, in that Afghanistan will bamboozle them, and Rashid Khan will probably take 3 for shit. But they might have just enough to get over the line against Afghanistan. But that will be the big one, really. I fancy that Australia, being so depleted, they can't win it all the time, and so I fancy that this might be one where they let it slip.
I think I would have gone South Africa and Australia had more Aussies been available.
But wait, why do you think South Africa are going to be good? They've won 5 out of 16 ODIs. They've lost 3 out of 4 bilaterals.
Yeah, I mean
they've had their first whitewash at home.
That's
actually their form is the worst of all the teams.
That is all fair, but they perhaps more than any other side haven't fielded their best teams in those
But you can't
series.
just rock up and suddenly field your best team and be like, oh, cool. Or maybe you can.
Well, I mean,
individuals, obviously.
But I think there's been so little 50 over cricket of meaning since the last World Cup. That is not far what this tournament is. And South Africa were good in the 50 over World Cup in 2023. Cricket Info posted a potential 11 of what it could look like, and it looked really strong, and it didn't even have Tristan Stubbs in it. Marco Janssen at 7 is potentially a spot high, and the bowlers look really good on paper, but you're right, they haven't played that much in the last year or so in this format. But I think in terms of 50 over pedigree, that is the best side in that group on paper, but with no form behind them. So, which is a fascinating balance, because this tournament gives you no time. Yeah. There's no time. If you have one bad day at the start, that could be it. I'm right saying 2017, Australia get knocked out because they lose once, because they get done by the rain in the other 2 games. So that could be what happens here. So yeah,
this is why it's a fun tournament. A couple of weeks, just to kind of mash up, really, and someone standing at the end.
Anyway, we've said what we think will happen. Here's what Mark Butcher thinks is going to happen. Champions Trophy starts tomorrow. Mark, we were quite negative about England on last week's show. They've only won 4 of their 14 games since the World Cup, but could conditions in Pakistan actually suit them?
Yeah, they could. I mean, a lot of the players have a liking for Pakistani conditions, particularly the batters, Duckett, Brook, etc. Pitches tend to be quite flat, although that trend has been thrown out of the window in the recent Test matches played there. But it would be more than likely that pitches will revert to type for the Champions Trophy. And of course, spin doesn't play as much of a part in Pakistan as perhaps it might do in Dubai, where India are playing their games, and where England came a cropper just recently against India. So, things are not quite as desperate as they seem. However, a lot of other teams will quite enjoy batting on flat pitches as well. And, I think because of the nature of the tournament, all being over and done with so quickly. Excuse me, by the way, I'm struggling with a nasty cold. Game 1 is absolutely vital. Can't afford to sort of go into it and sort of work your way into the tournament. There isn't a tournament as such. You got 3 games. You lose your first one, you could be out. So England have got to hit the ground running, and that's the thing I think that perhaps goes against them more than anything else. In that, in recent times, their record in 50 over cricket, and in the last World Cup itself, has been pretty dire, and so they're going to have to turn something around almost, magically from their recent form in order to start off in the way that might get them a little bit of momentum running.
You mentioned the pitches. You've watched loads of PSL cricket over the last few years. What do you normally get in the PSL? Because I feel like people lump Asian pitches together, but actually they can be more different than people often give them credit for.
I mean, Rawalpindi generally is an absolute road. Multan can be a little bit sort of sticky. Karachi tends to be okay. I mean, it's sort of like an average scoring surface in PSL cricket. And Lahore can be either, really. You can get scores of 200 plus in T20s, or they can be reasonably low scoring. So that one's a slightly more difficult one to pin. But generally speaking, sort of a good seam bowling attack and 1.5, one very good spinner and one somebody that can mix and match a little bit for you, depending on the batting combinations that you might be playing against, can be enough. But we shall see. You say all of this, and as I've said in recent times, the pitches are turned square completely by design. But whether or not you can then sort of go, roll back on all of that and turn them into flat ones again, I don't know.
England are playing 2 of their group stage games at Lahore and the final one against South Africa at Karachi. And you feel that Afghanistan game in particular at Lahore, that's where conditions will dictate how that game goes. If it's spin friendly, Afghanistan arguably would start that game as favourites, having done England at the 50 over World Cup last year, and that obviously playing into their strengths.
Yeah, and England having no real backup to Adil Rashid. And that sort of the lack of a genuine second spin bowler kind of leaves them a little bit exposed if the conditions happen to suit that style of cricket. Yeah.
Looking at the teams that might be strongest on paper, Australia normally one of the favourites going into tournaments like this. They've had so many absentees. I'm sure they'll be fine, but they're probably not as strong as they normally are. India, obviously, favourites by a long way. But then New Zealand and South Africa are quite interesting for me. New Zealand, I don't think they're the most spectacular side on paper, but given where we are in a World Cup cycle, and a lot of these teams haven't actually got that much 50-over cricket in them, they also feel like a side that's quite well balanced in that sometimes I feel, especially nowadays, with we talked a lot last week about how batters are struggling to adapt to playing 50-over cricket, having not played it. I also feel that's the same for bowlers as well. It's a really hard format, especially for a seamer, to be able to bowl 10 overs in at different phases of the innings. So having a bit of bowling cover is really helpful. And New Zealand are able to do that with the way their side is balanced.
Yeah, obviously, likes of Santner and Brayshaw. One of the things that perhaps that counts against New Zealand a little bit when it comes to sort of T20 tournament play, i.e., the relative age and experience of teams who kind of, you feel like you've watched them do it time after time after time and not be quite good enough. It might actually be something that holds them in really good stead in this tournament. That experience, that real depth in terms of battle hardness when it comes to 50-over cricket. Obviously, they just won a tri-series in Pakistan as well, so they've got really good preparation for it. And also, perhaps this is where they come unstuck. They actually feel like one of the favourites, rather, as opposed to a team that you expect to make it the semi-finals and not win. So, I think they're in as good a position as anybody, particularly with Australia's sort of relative weakness going into it. I think there's something about this format now in that a lot of teams are sort of ignoring. It's not quite the right word, but there just doesn't seem to be the amount of 50-over cricket played across the board. It's not just us. Than everybody else, and that sort of, rather than being very, very exciting, and sort of wow, look what these guys can do. A team that are very steady over the course of the 50-over contest might actually be the one that turns out to be the winners, particularly if the conditions are relatively benign for them. Then it comes down to sort of who can do their job and who is best suited to not making any massive errors, that might just win the whole thing.
And finally, South Africa looked like one of the strongest sides on paper. Obviously had a really good 2023 World Cup campaign. Not played loads of 50-over cricket with their first team recently, but if they get things right, they could really challenge India.
Yes, they could. The group that England plays in with Australia, South Africa, and Afghanistan is pretty tough, I think. And South Africa they just have an enormous amount of high quality players in every department. And yes, whilst they haven't played a massive amount of 50-over cricket together, a batting lineup with Heinrich Klaasen in it, with Miller and Markram in the middle order looks very, very strong. And of course, Marco Jansen with the new ball has been an absolute revelation in recent times. A genuine wicket-taking option who can bowl 10 overs instead of just 4, but also is a damn sight better number 7 than most teams can call upon. The Keshav Maharaj with the ball is again very, very canny, very experienced, and should go well in the conditions. I suppose that the only thing is that they're lacking a little bit in sort of depth in terms of the fast bowling, but Rabada is fit. They've got somebody like Corbin Bosch who might not make everybody's idea of their sort of strongest first 11, but I think he's a very, very good bowler, and also offers them something with the bat down the order as well. So that there's a lot to like about South Africa. Yeah, I mean we've said that plenty of times before, mine, and they managed to stuff it up, but they look a very, very good bet, who will probably be at quite long odds if you're of that persuasion that you're going to stick a few quid down.
Well, they got to a final in a world event last year, so they're going upwards in the world. But we'll leave it there. Rest up, and see you next week.
Thanks. Yeah, sit in front of the TV for a couple of weeks.
If you're feeling the blues this winter, this might be of interest to you. Over the last few weeks, we partnered with Manual. 1 in 4 men in the UK suffer from low testosterone levels, and you might be one of them. The at-home blood test kit from Manual is a ridiculously quick and easy way to find out your testosterone levels and what may be causing you to have symptoms like a lack of focus, low energy, sudden weight gain, or poor sleep quality. Phil, I believe you have been sent a kit.
Well, I've sent it away for then to be returned.
And the
It
process
was so macho that it probably won't come back. It'll just
I
go off into
fear-
the sunset.
I fear your sarcasm is well placed. I'm nervy. I've got to be honest. I'm nervy.
I get advertised a lot of low testosterone advertising on my social media accounts, and I think they're onto something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
The algorithm's got
if
you.
it comes back saying that I'm a bit on the low side, then I'd rather know.
Yeah.
And then what?
Well, then we can start to deal with it, can't we?
With our friends at Manual.
With our friends at Manual.
So-
They've been emailing me, WhatsApping me as well. It's a proper
So
service.
86% of patients record an improvement in their energy levels and enjoyment of
What
life
if I
after
want?
just
Can
3
I have
months.
some more?
I'm not medically qualified to provide an answer to that, but we'll ask our friends at Manual and they'll get back to you.
We can give you a Wisden mug.
Let's arm wrestle for it. I win.
But you
Yeah. So anyway, it takes a couple of minutes to do the bit, and then you send it away. And I sent it this morning, and by this time next week, don't know if I'll be on the show next week or not, but as soon as I'm next on, I will let you know to what extent my testosterone is good, bad, or indifferent.
Anyway, you can check in with yourself, try a test kit, and save 45% on your test with the code weekly45 at checkout. Next up, we talked about the Patreon earlier on in the show. As I said, Joe Harmon interviewed Carl Hooper, Valentine's Day special. Genuinely, a really nice interview just because Hooper is Joe's first cricketing love. Joe was brought up right next to the Canterbury ground and Hooper was the overseas back then. But also, it's just really interesting because Hooper had a fascinating career in that if you look at the team he made his debut in, it's all-time greats. And then the team that he plays his last game for West Indies 16 years later is one that's much, much weaker in the world game. So a really interesting career. He talks about how he got so good early on in his career. And it's basically because where he was brought up in Guyana, there are high flood risks. So all the houses are on stilts. So the cricket pitch he played on was underneath his house and it was like 12 yards. So when you had a fast bowler bowling, you had to have good instincts. And yeah, it's a fascinating interview. He talks about his West Indies career, sharing a dressing room with the greats, and also he speaks very fondly about his time at Kent.
On your own game, Brian Lara has described you as one of the best talents that the West Indies ever produced and one of the best players he's ever seen. He went on to say that even Tendulkar and himself didn't possess the same talent as you. That's quite some praise to come from one of the best cricketers who's ever lived.
That's a bit of a stretch, I think.
Do you think?
I think. I mean, you're talking about a bloke that's got nearly 40. How much test hundreds has Sachin got? Nearly 40? How much has he got? I mean,
Well, yeah, he's got 100 in all, hasn't he? So, yeah.
how are you talking about a phenomenal player? I mean, if I was half as good at Sachin, then, I'd be happy with that. No, I think that's a bit of a stretch. But hey, I'll take the compliment. But I'm not stupid to think that, hey, that's I know better than that,
There's a stat you've probably heard before, but you were the first cricketer in the world to have scored 5,000 runs, taken 100 wickets, held 100 catches, and received 100 caps in both ODIs and Tests. I think only Callis has done it since. By any measure, you had a serious career. But I guess there is also perhaps still that feeling that your batting numbers at international level didn't reflect how gifted you were as a player. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah, fair comment. I would love to have scored a few more Test hundreds, maybe another. I think it was good. I should have been between 8 and 10,000 Test runs. I suppose looking back, because again, sometimes as a coach now, you say, well, how could I have maximized my ability? Where could I have done something better or whatever the case may be? When I was young, coming through the ranks, I used to hit a lot of balls. I mean, that's all we did, just play cricket and so on. And even when I say through the ranks, I mean, even during playing on the 19th for your country, West Indies youth, West Indies A's. I used to be hitting a lot of balls. When I got into the West Indies team, my competition at the time was a guy called Roger Harper. And this was this back in the time when we used to play 4 fast bowlers. And there was you can bowl 60 overs in a day, no problem. In fact, if you bowl 60 overs, we'll probably bowl you out. Anyway, then the ICC introduced, you got to get in 19 a day. So somewhere along the line, somebody has got to be able to bowl 15, 18 overs. When it says somebody, it's spinner. That's one of the things that I saw, right? So I started to bowl some spin, I mean, I did this, it wasn't something new to me because I did it while I was also playing youth championships and so on. I bowled some spin, off spin. But I started to take it a bit serious, because obviously you're bowling now to better players. You're bowling to some of the best players in the world. So you've got to make sure that what you're putting down, it's decent. So you've got to pay attention to it and you've got to spend time trying to develop it. So I reckon there was a time when you go for a practice session and you'd have a bat. But I mean, I watch how all the good players do it. They'd have a bat and they will make sure that if an opportunity presents, or sometimes they will create the opportunity list and like to stay back afterwards and have some more. And they will get whether it's in net bowlers or get whoever. And then they will keep honing the skills, working on your skills in the net. But a lot of times I would come to the nets and I'd have a bat. You bat for 15, 20 minutes, which is not enough, and then you'd have to bowl for the rest of the practice session. And these days, those times where we go and start a practice session at 9 o'clock. You train for 3 hours, 3-4 hours. So if you say you take your batting for 20 minutes, if you bat for 20 minutes, you're talking you're bowling for another 2 hours plus. You'd have a little break, have some bit of water and so on, but more or less you have to bowl. So this is the way it was done. So I reckon my batting probably went off a little bit, I think. Probably wasn't as sharp as you probably could be, right? And then again, your mindset. I think I got into a stage where a bit of a rut where you'd get a score, you get 100 today. And rather than making sure that you build on that 100, you've got a next innings coming up, make sure you run with it, okay? You get 100 and then, 3, 4, 5, 6 innings pass, you don't get a score, and then you might hear murmurings or maybe you should be left out. And then you get another score. You know what I mean? So it was like that. It was like that up until when I got the captaincy. But my whole mindset then was completely different. I was newly married. Some people had come into my life that really, really, well, apart from my wife, my mother-in-law was really close to her. I had some really, really solid support, which was good. And I reckon just from a mental perspective, there wasn't much technically that change in my game. It was the same, but I had the hunger and the drive and the ability now to maybe score 100. And then the next game, I wanted more. And the next game, I wanted more, And I think that reflected in sort of the latter half, the back half of my career.
Middlesex have announced the signing of Kane Williamson for a good chunk of the 2025 season. Williamson will play 10 out of Middlesex's 14 Blast group games and at least 5 county championship games. A serious signings there. I've seen a couple of journalists say that, like with previous high-profile Middlesex signings in the past, the MCC have contributed to the money that Williamson is going to receive. Elsewhere at Lords, bit of news around the 100 this week. The MCC chair, Martin Nicholas, in a letter to MCC members, said that they are open to changing the team name for 2026 as well as the team colours to incorporate the colours of the MCC. My genuine first reaction to this news was, what about the Trent Rockets? Because they've got very similar colours to
unsettling.
The MCC.
It's unsettling because that too was my thought.
Originally sponsored by Tyrrell's, be wandering around looking like a bunch of skips.
Well, I think these are the big questions. These are the big questions, and I'm glad we're asking them. There was also a press conference last week around the sale of the 100. Lots of very interesting things in it. It was a very long press conference, but very informative. Basically, the ECB were answering lots of questions. I was, yeah. The ECB were answering loads of questions that journalists had about the sale of 100 and what it all means, etc., etc. If you have questions, I would genuinely go to the ECB website. They have a very helpful FAQ page on the sale of the 100. It's very detailed in terms of what's actually been sold, what the money that the ECB have got in is going to be used for. There's a lot of detail there. So I would highly recommend visiting the ECB website for that. But there's one bit, one angle that I hadn't previously considered, and this is around Pakistani participation in the 100. So Pakistani players haven't played in the IPL since the first edition in 2008. But what has probably been a little bit under the radar is, this is a quote from an article on ESPN Quick Info from this week, that there remains little, if any, Pakistan representation in IPL-owned teams at both the ILT20 and Major League Cricket. So we know that IPL owners also own other teams in other leagues, and there's very, very little evidence that Pakistan players are being picked for these teams. And the 100 has actually lent quite heavily on Pakistan talent in the last few years. So I think that is quietly one of the bigger stories that might emerge this year. Anyway, I think that's it for today's show.
All right, then.
That
was everything today. Thank you, Kate. It's been great having you in with
so
us.
much fun. Thanks for having me back.
Phil, great to have you on as always. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast.
Don't
We'll
laugh
be back
when he
next
says
week.
that.
He couldn't keep a straight frigging
He meant
face.
it. He loves you.
What's wrong with smiling when you talk?
Well, look,
You lies about how much
yes, it's an honour and a privilege.
We'll be back next week.
Maybe not with me.